Hello? Hello? Can you guys hear me now? Is it better? It's telling me that the audio is coming through, so not sure what is going on. Oh, great. Awesome. Ah, that took a while. Alright. So I think the problem was my OBS settings. They were just defaulting to a microphone that I don't even have, or I don't even know if it's connected. Yeah, just yell at me on the chat. Just let me know if you can hear me. Alright, RS Lopez, thanks so much. Jason, hey, welcome guys. Great. Alright. Sorry about that hiccup, those technical issues, but it's being addressed. Awesome. I'm just going to do a quick screenshot of the settings, so just for the next time it doesn't happen, or if it happens again, so I know how to fix it. Okay, cool. Just save that. Alrighty, so here we are guys. I'm going to be continuing with this bonsai. Welcome Oscar. Hey George, thanks for hanging around. So yeah, I'm gonna continue with this bonsai, and I'm trying to make it a little bit more interesting and more generally better. I'm gonna keep it stylized like I did with the leaves and the general shape, and I have a bunch of references here on the other screen. You guys maybe can see it on the camera. I'm just gonna bring that to this side. 1 second. Alright, so I'm using PureRef. If you guys don't know about that, software is an absolute gem. So since I found out about this software, PureRef, this is what I use all the time now. So I just collected a bunch of references, even like little pots like this, and I'm gonna try to do a couple of things, or at least show you a couple of techniques of how I would approach the bark. But I think I like this type of. That's why I have it very prominent here. I like this type of swirly bark. I think it looks really interesting. Although the size of the leaves of my tree are more in line with this type of thing. So again, I'm not trying to copy necessarily any of these trees, so I'm just making my own. But I think I'm going to go for something like that, and I'll show you another technique to create maybe a more intricate bark texture, but that might not go as well with the bonsai, but you know, just so that you guys know how I would approach that. So I'm going to put that on the other side, on the other screen, and just so you know that I have some reference here that I'm trying to follow. Alright. So there is someone speaking through a can. Is that how I sound? Maybe I should just reduce the noise. I don't want to mess with my microphone anymore, but I might have to. Alright. Hey Nasumi, how you going? Welcome to the stream. Yeah, so I was mentioning that I need to do a few things, or tweak a few things before I get started with the things that I want to show you today, guys. And I have a bunch of techniques, I guess, that I can show you. But before we get started, I just want to share with you the new ZBrush guides, because I mentioned last week that I was going to be live, or a couple of weeks ago, and I published it last week, and I'm really excited. Here it is. So this is a brand new website, and it's a completely new website. It's a rebuild of the previous one. So what it took me most of the time was to rebuild each one of the posts and the tutorials and migrate all the content. But I was concentrating on creating a more engaging and easier user interface, so that you guys can find what you're looking for. So this is the new home. You can find the latest tutorials or the latest guides here, or you can click this browse the full library, and it will take you to the full library. So essentially the homepage is just a shortcut to what's going on, news and updates, feature resources, things like that. And then you can go to the tutorials page, and this is the one that it's one of the core pages of the website, and you can just browse the library for something specific, or you can use the new filters. So I'm really excited to finally share these with you guys. one of the things that you'll find is, well, maybe you won't be able to see it, but since I rebuilt everything, I started from scratch, and I made sure that the behind the scenes, the code, if you will, although I don't know much about it, but the structure of the website is better in a way that I can upload more content like easier. Doesn't have to be this cumbersome process to upload stuff, which is what I was doing before. So now I will be able to create more content and upload it fairly soon, or like every now and again. So that's the tutorials page. And another thing is that I went ahead and made sure that everything was more consistent in terms of how the tutorials are displayed. So if, for example, you go to, I don't know, let's go to reviews, filter by reviews, and you go to, let's check this one out, I don't know, something that you probably haven't seen. Let's go to the new ZBrush Guides 2018, and also, this is just very quickly before we start with the stream, just want to get this out of the way. So for the most part, you'll see a banner, and then you have this review snapshot or tutorial snapshot that gives you a quick visual of what the whole thing is about, the software, what you'll learn, and some of these guides, like this one in this case, has these extra sort of links, and those are basically to navigate the whole thing, because it's a pretty long guide. Alright, so with that out of the way, one more thing, the resources is now another part of the core sites or pages of the website, and then you have access to the whole library here, some guides that have resources, including maybe this is the latest one or the newest one, which are some skin brushes. I'm happy to show you some stuff at the end of the stream if you guys want. But the most important things are these icons here. You can click any of these: brushes, materials, alphas, meshes, anything you want. So let's go for materials, for example, and that should open a dedicated page just for the materials. And again, the focus of this new website was usability. So you have this banner section where I will feature certain things like the brushes for materials pack. And I just noticed a spelling mistake, but I'll fix that up. So you can click this browsing material library, and you can also filter by the type of material. So you can go, for example, to I don't know, presentation materials, and you have all these presentation materials. And this plastic blue is currently the one that I am using here, just with a yellow color, but this is how this material looks like, this one right here. And obviously if I mix this blue with a little bit of yellow, that's how I got that sort of greenish look of this bonsai. Okay, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to show you. Obviously if you click any of these things, they will start downloaded automatically, and that's pretty much it. I just wanted to show you that the website is live. You can go back and review it, check it out. It is a completely new website, so I would appreciate if you guys, if you find something interesting, to leave a comment, because all the comments I had to unfortunately got rid of them, because I couldn't transfer them or migrate them. So we need to add some of those. All right. And like I said, the latest brushes pack is about the skin pores and things like that. So if you guys want, at the end of this stream, I will show you a little bit of that. But let's get straight into it before we waste any more time on technicalities and other stuff. All right. So let me just check the chat. Saludos de Guayaquil, Ecuador. Saludos desde Melbourne. And to me, I really like the skin brushes. Crazy low price. It's just, to be honest, those little packs, I'm happy to share them like that. It's just a collection of things that I do for specific projects. So I just spend some time cleaning them up and make sure that they work and they're scalable, as in you can use them yourself. All right, let's get straight into it now. So here we have the bonsai, and as you can see, the placement of these, if you remember the leaves, we use the nanomesh tool. So if we go to the nanomesh sub palette, let's go ahead and select the leaves, the sub tool. So if you check the placement, and I'm going to turn off nanomesh, these are basically single planes that we use to create nanomesh based on the placement of these planes. Now the problem with this is that they come based on the normal of the underlying geometry, or in this case this branch, or the trunk of the tree. So whenever you drag, it's just going to create that plane perpendicular to that normal surface. So that's why they all have different angles and all that. So that's a problem, because if I turn nanomesh and turn off the show placement, some of these bunches of leaves are facing towards the camera, some of them are facing upwards, some of them are completely rotated, so that creates a bit of a problem. But it's alright, as we were just in the last stream, we were just blocking out the shapes and figuring out what to do. Let me just double check. Now the audio is distorting. I can't figure out what to do with the audio. Please let me know if you can hear me alright. Maybe I can push it further away. Is that better? Hopefully it is. Cool. So what I went ahead and did was, I have a new version of the tree. So you can see I just spent some time tweaking the position of the leaves, and it's just a matter of rotating or moving the planes around. So you'll see the difference between this and this. And the idea is to capture that sort of more, how would you call it, like the shape of the tree, sort of like cascading, creating an arc around. So let me just show you here. So it's more something like that, and it just feels more natural, right? So that's what I'm trying to go for. Obviously, if we change to the previous one, you'll see that it's not following these lines as good, or it's not having that impactful, I guess, silhouette. And one of the most important things for me is to get the forms right and the shapes right, and at this very blocky stage before continuing with anything else. Although this particular bonsai is pretty stylized and all that, but the forms are super important. So I'm just going to show you how I went ahead and did that, or how I rotated those planes. So the first thing I did was make sure that the show placement was enabled, so that I can see the planes. Currently it's hard to see because I don't have polyframe enabled, but if I enable polyframe, let me switch to maybe a different material so it is easy for you guys to see. So each one of these blue squares are the placement of these leaves. So I'm going to change this one, for example, that is facing the camera, maybe to straight. And the way that I do that is I'll bring the Gizmo 3D, and I can hold the Alt key to just reposition that. But if I hold the Control keys, or the Control to access the masking tools, I can just mask one area or one of these planes and go ahead and rotate that individually. So this becomes more of a manual process, of course, but we have all the benefits of a manual process, which is we have lots of control of where to place it. So just so you can see what is happening behind the scenes, because the leaves are a bit hard to, well, it's hard to see what is happening. I'm going to turn these off so you can see the planes. And as you can see, most of them I just changed the rotation and the position. This one right here is maybe too rotated in the wrong way. So here's what I did. So hold Control again to access the masking tools, and make sure that the Gizmo 3D is enabled. So when you hold Control and click any of these vertex, it kind of like masks everything that is not continuously attached to this set of polygons, or the continuity of this topology. So that allows you to start rotating. Obviously it's going to do it from this vertex here that I started the masking, but you can just hold this or click on this icon and it will center it right in the middle of this plane. And now you can use any tool to rotate it. I wouldn't recommend to rotate it without seeing the actual nanomesh that is being applied, because it will be hard to judge with the rest of them. So I'm going to turn on nanomesh again, and now that I have that on, I can just go ahead and do this. Make sure I cover them. Obviously there's some parts that will be intersecting. That is for that's another thing to worry about later on, but probably not for this quick sketch. Alright, so I'm gonna click on the show placement, Now we have our final sort of like block out, and now we have a more interesting shape that feels more natural before we can move on. So now that we have that covered, we're going to go ahead and do some details for the tree bark. Like I said, I want to show you two techniques. Alright, so the best thing, or the first thing really that I'm going to show you is how to do it with nanomesh as well. So we need to go ahead and create a piece of bark or a little mesh that we can use to populate the rest of the bark. So I'm going to go ahead and switch and create another tool. So I'm going to go for a sphere, and I'm going to turn that into a polymesh 3D. I'm going to bring in the Gizmo 3D and scale that up. And what I'm trying to go for here is just a very small part of the bar, something that has quite a bit of texture. So in a way, it's gonna look kind of like a piece of like a rock maybe. But once it's putting all together, or once it's put all together, it's gonna look more like a bark. So with this stretch like that, I'm gonna go ahead and switch back to this draw mode. Maybe turn off polyframe so it is easy to see. And I'm going to select the move brush, make sure that the AccuCurve is enabled, scale my brush size, and I'm going to start pulling some areas here. Maybe at this point we can also enable the Sculptris Pro so that we can do this type of stretching without worrying too much about the underlying topology. So I'm going to try to maintain kind of like a flat area here. This side of the tree or this side of the piece of bark doesn't really matter because it's not going to be visible. It's going to be too embedded into the tree. Okay. I'm just doing this very randomly, but again, you could use some references. Alright, so another thing that we can do is use the masking lasso tool I currently have selected. Hold Control and mask out an area like that. And one of the things that I really like about the Sculptris Pro tool is that it allows you to use the effect of the Sculptris Pro or subdivide the mesh even when you have the masking on. So if I turn polyframe, you'll see the effect. I'm going to hold shift and reduce the size of my brush. Hold shift again, and I can reduce the size of the polygons, which ultimately adds resolution to this part before I do anything. And I'm just maintaining this part as it was because of the masking. So now that I have that, I can bring in the gizmo, stretch that up, maybe on this axis as well, and just push this forward a little bit, and clear the mask. Alright, so I can go ahead and clean this a little bit with the smooth brush, and continue with that technique, sort of creating pieces just with using the masking brush and the Gizmo 3D. So hopefully you guys can see already what I'm going for with this, or where I'm going with this. I'm going to push this up a bit. So I'm trying to create this sort of layered effect that some of these very particular bark has. Alright, so that's looking good. I'm going to clear that mask and do one more here. Bring in the Gizmo 3D, maybe push that forward, increase the size. Alright, just move that around. And let's reduce the size of the smooth brush and add some geometry here, especially in the areas that I distorted with the movement. Okay, so we're getting close. I know this doesn't look like much right now, but again, this is going to be a little piece of the puzzle. I'm going to bring in the damp standard brush as well, and I'm going to carve in with a smaller brush size. I'm going to carve in a little bit more of detail here, maybe push this indentation as well. And I know this looks very sketchy, but again, because this is going to be a nano mesh in a similar technique like the way that we created the leaves for the bonsai, we're going to have to reduce the polygon count significantly with the decimation master. So I'm just going to very sketchy add this indentation, so that, or these crevices here, just to make sure that the decimation master picks that up and maintain a little bit of the detail when it does its thing. Alright. Obviously, if you make it too specific, or like with too many feature areas, it's going to be very evident that you're using the same brush or the same model to populate an area using the nano mesh. So I like to try to keep this as generic as I can, although this one seems to be quite distinctive, I guess. I can also hold the Alt key and even sharpen these edges a bit more. Alright, I'm not going to spend too much time here because this is not the final technique that I'm going to be using anyway. Or maybe we can use a combination of the two, I'm not sure at this point. Alright, so I think this one looks alright. We can bring in the trim dynamic as well and just flatten some areas just to stylize it a little bit. And that also helps us to create variation in the sort of the planes of this little piece, and that will be taken into account when we do the decimation master. So just a little bit to add variation here. Let me just check the chat. Alright. So maybe the mic sensitivity is too high. It's pretty loud too. Right. So I'm going to move this all the way to, this is the maximum sensitivity, I think. Is it louder? Can you guys let me know? Do you prefer number 1 or you prefer number 2? Or is there any change at all? Trying to get the settings right in the actual microphone. Alright, I'm going to leave it there. If you guys think it's too loud or too noisy, too weird, not much of a change. How about this? Is this better? Or is this better? Not much of a change? So it must be the OBS streaming settings. I'm just happy that I made it work. Not sure how to enhance the audio. Maybe let's see if I can reduce it straight from here. Just 1 second. Alright, I just reduced the volume a little bit, so it's not as loud. Let me see. Let me know if that's a little bit better. Okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna continue here, pushing things with the trim dynamic. And I think we are ready to go. So this part here at the back, we're not going to use it, so we can increase the size of the brush and then just push that in a bit. When I'm saying that I'm not going to be using it is, what I'm saying really is that it won't be visible when we apply it, but we might use a little bit of randomization and rotate things a bit randomly, so we might see a little bit of it. And you'll see that I have this kind of gap here, and that's intentional. I'll show you why. So I'm going to even make it a little more exaggerated. So I'm not sure if this is going to work, but I'll show you the idea. So the idea here is that I can, let me just show you. Once I create this as a nanomesh, if this is the surface or the bark of the tree trunk, there's going to be this little gap here. If the center point that I'm dragging from is here, so leaving this little gap here also helps with the effect that I'm going for. And if let me just drop this with a snapshot, and if I duplicate this, for example, here, which is ultimately what's going to happen with the nanomesh, there's going to be kind of like a interlocking of these shapes around this area. So that is the idea. We'll see how we go. So now that I have this little piece, I'm going to go to the C plugin, take the decimation master, and I'm also going to turn on polyframe so I can see the effect. I'm going to pre-process current, wait until ZBrush analyzes this mesh, then go back and reduce the decimation significantly to maybe to 8, and click decimation or decimate current. So that did a pretty good job, but I think still too much. We can reduce it even more. So let's just go for 4%. So that's not too bad. We currently have 3,000 polygons in this, or vertex in this current tool. I think I'm going to try it even more. This is going to be very exaggerated, but let's give it a go. 2.2% decimate current, even more. This is what I like about this plugin. It just maintains the shapes really nicely, and it reduces the polygon count a bit. Alright, so I think this is much better. From the distance anyway, this piece is going to be this big anyway, so we can do with this. Let me just check. Alright, I'm just taking with Kyle about the microphone issue, but I lowered the input so it shouldn't be as loud anymore. Hopefully that sounds better. Please let me know. Alright. Thanks, Kingsley. Alright, so now that I have this piece here, let's just go ahead and turn it into an insert mesh, or create a new insert mesh. And from the insert mesh, now that we can do this type of thing, let's undo that, I can turn that into a nano mesh brush. Alright, similar process to what we did with the bonsai leaves. And let's go back to our current tool. That's not the one, this is the one. And let's go ahead and add it to the tree bark. So I'm gonna select the trunk and the branches, and I'm going to isolate it just by going into solo mode, and let's turn on polyframe. Okay, so we can simply click and drag to add this tree bark, but if you look at these areas here, these polygons are going to be too small for this nanomesh, or in other words, when we drag in the nanomesh, it's going to be very crowded in these areas, and that's the opposite of what we want. So we need to clean this up a little bit before we drag, but I want to show you what happens if I do it right now, because it creates like an interesting effect that, I don't know, could work for like some kind of virus thing. So if I click and drag, well, right now it's just adding a single one, which again you could start doing this type of thing, but that's pretty much the same thing as using the insert brushes, so too manual. So I'm going to hover over this face, press the spacebar, and I have the action as insert nanomesh, but I'm going to change it to all polygroups, or polygroup all. Okay, so now it's going to do it to the entire polygroup. This is a single polygroup. So hopefully it's not going to because there's a lot of geometry I'm adding here. Yeah, so it's pretty heavy, but as you can see, it's doing the opposite to what we need. These little branches are the ones that are getting all the details, and that's what I said. It looks like a kind of like a virus thing, instead of the bark or the trunk, which is what we're going for. So I'm going to undo that. And in order to clean this up or to set it ready for using nanomesh, I'm going to switch to maybe the move brush, and I'm going to switch to this lasso lasso selection tool, and I just need to create some polygroups to stay away from this area. So Control and Shift to isolate this, and I'm going to quickly remove all these parts. Well, not remove, just hide them. Oops. So Control Shift, click and drag to select this, and then hold the Alt key, and that will hide that area. Just try to be careful not to leave any of these triangles here, because those are the ones that will give me more of a problem. So essentially just reverting what we did in the last stream in terms of combining the mesh. Oops. Sounds better. Okay, can you randomize different bark pieces with nanomesh? Yeah, absolutely. And we will be doing that in just a second. What I'm doing here is just setting it up so that it doesn't add the pieces in the places that I want, that I don't want to have those pieces assigned to. So in other words, I just want those pieces to be in the main sort of tree, on the main trunk. I don't know if that's the right word, by the way. I'll just keep saying it. Alright, so here we go. I think that looks alright. I'm going to Control W to assign a single polygroup to that. Alright, so now we can bring in our brush, the custom brush that we did with the bark, and because we already assigned or selected the target to be polygroup all, is going to look at only the green parts or whatever I first press to add the nanomesh. So I'm going to click and drag. Like so. And you'll see that these areas are still pretty big. But I'm going to try to do my best to reduce the size using the nanomesh tools or the nanomesh settings. And for that, let's go ahead and bring in the nanomesh. Like I said, this is not the technique that I'm going to use anyway, but I want to give you some ideas for how you can use that. So the first thing I want to do is play around with these switches here, and that way we can change the size, for example, of the little piece that we introduced in here with nanomesh to be the size of each polygon or each face. So in other words, let me just explain that a little bit better. So if I have polygon that is this big around this area, and I have a tiny little polygon that is this big around this area, with these switches here we can set, alright, we want to feed it to this entire thing. So now the shape that what we did is going to feed that size of the polygon, and in this area is going to feed that side of the polygon. So that should give us a more gradual change of the sizes. So let's go ahead and do that. So change to fit, and you'll see that fits into those areas a little bit better. There's still some issues here because that's it has to do with the underlying geometry, but I'll show you a really quick and really nice way to fix that. The next thing that I want to do is randomize it a little bit so that we don't clearly see these areas as much. So we can play, again, you can try fill, see if that works better for you. I think fit is better. And we can play with the size. So we can reduce the size, and we can play with the offset. So in this case, I think we're going to use the offset in X. Let's see. Now the X is not the one that I'm looking for. Yeah, maybe the offset in the Y. So you see how they sort of slide through the mesh. I'm gonna increase that a little bit and then add variation here, so that it's not very obvious. Maybe a little bit as well on the X offset, and add variation. Too much. Alright, so I'm starting to add some variation, but we have some gaps in here. So maybe what we can do is add a tile in the horizontal tile. Let's see if that does anything. Once, not or twice. That is to reduce the size of the actual piece, but sort of tile it within each one of the faces. So in other words, we have per each polygon, now we have 2 of these pieces on each polygon with this H tile. If we were to use the V tile, what happens is that then we'll have, if we added just one more tile, we have 4 of these on each one of the polygons. I'm not entirely sure that that's what I want to go for, so I'm going to remove that, and then we can scale the width and the length a little bit, maybe the height as well, and just play with variation. So all I'm doing here is trying to randomize this a bit more. We can increase the size so that we can, close some of those gaps. And again, don't worry about this area here. I'll show you a way that we can fix that. So I'm just concentrating on this area, trying to get that right. And let's go ahead and add a little bit of rotation as well. So this one doesn't really work. It just creates this sort of effect for like a scales. It's not necessarily what we're going for. So let's see. Maybe the rotation in Y is what we need, and then add variation to it, and also rotation in this axis, in the Z axis, and we can add variation to it. So rotating in this axis, if I exaggerate it, we can get this sort of like twirl effect or sort of spiral effect within the tree, as you can see here. This is the type of effect that we're getting by rotating each one of those pieces in the Z axis. So that's kind of cool, and that's similar to what I'm going for. And we still have some problems around there, but we'll fix that in just a second. There's no problem. There's no worries at all. I think, let's see if we can add rotation in the x-axis. Oh no, we said that that's not the one that we need. More variation. I think we're good. I think that's all we need for as a starting point. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn off polyframe, so you can see the effect of this guy. I'm going to render this really quickly, so you can see that it's very, very interesting what we get in here. So there's a very quick and easy way to fix all these problems and fine-tune these areas a little bit more, and I'll show you how in just a second. Let me just check the chat. Yep, it sounds better. Great. Hey Hoover Abejero. I use this method in creating crawling crystal vines. Yeah, this nanomesh technique is really, really powerful for anything. It's really the particle effect or the particle system in ZBrush, because you can add anything that has repetition and populate like massive areas with stuff like this. I used it recently in a little project, nothing too big, for creating a quick city that it was gonna be seen from above, like far away. But I created like simple cubes with textures and used the nanomesh to populate like the plane or the terrain, and it created all these buildings really nicely. And obviously you can define like the streets and stuff with different polygroups, and it creates a city really, really quickly. So it's really powerful technique. All right. So let me show you how I would clean all these areas that look very messy. Although I kind of like how this is overlapping, but I'm going to show you how to clean it anyway. So the best way to go about it would be to go to the inventory, and I'm going to turn these nanomesh into an actual mesh. So I'm going to click this one to mesh, and if we check the setup tool, what just happened. Did I convert it? Yeah, so let me check the polygroups. Yeah, so I converted the nano mesh into actual mesh, but it's part of the subtool. So I'm going to hold Control and Shift, and I'm going to click on the polygroups of these pieces to isolate them, and now I'm going to split hidden from this palette here, and now we have, let's get out of solo mode, we have that tree bark in a separate subtool. So what I'll do is I'm going to hold Shift to isolate only these pieces, and I'm going to also turn on these pieces. So this is the equivalent of using solo mode, but only on more than one subtool. So what I did is I just hide everything else except these two. So again, you do that with holding Shift and toggling this visibility on the subtool that you're at, and then just turning on whichever you want to continue working on. Sounds like my microphone is doubling up. Alright, I'm gonna check that out. Hello? Can you hear me? Is it better? I just disabled some mic auxiliary audio device. I don't know if that does anything. Is it better now? I'm reducing the... Oh, hang on a second. I think I made a huge mistake. Okay, better? I think we are good to go. Let me know if you can hear me. I crashed ZBrush. So, audio's back on. Sounds better? Sounds good? Yeah, so I figured out what the problem was, and it was totally my fault. I just didn't see it. When I was messing around with the audio and I applied the settings, I basically created like 3 or 4 microphones in the OBS, and they were all coming through at the same time. So that's no good. But again, it's good to know that what the problem was. Let me see if ZBrush saved something. Looks like we did save some of the problems here. All right, we're back. Whew, let's see if that works. Took a while, but we finally worked it out. Alrighty. There's something weird going on here. Oh no, never mind. It was just me. Alright. So if you guys can hear me all good, we are good to continue. So like I said before, we just splitted the branches from the actual pieces that we created with the nanomesh. So now that we have these as separate pieces, we can go ahead and bring in the Move Topological brush, for example, with a larger size, and we can also enable AccuCurve so that we get that pointy areas, and we can come through with this brush, and because that would respect, or it should respect, the topology, we can start pushing these things down to get that fix. Okay, this is going to be probably the most problematic part, this area here, because we had really big pieces of geometry. But again, it's not a big deal. And I'm getting these sort of pieces that are coming through and getting out of the tree, and I kind of like that. We're probably gonna go for something very stylized anyway, so that all helps. But as you can see, for example, this piece that I have right here, because I have the AccuCurve, I can take this point or this corner, and when I move it, it's gonna create this very bendy shape. So that's what I'm going for. Again, you can change the size of your brush to adjust it and use it as well to fill in some gaps a little bit better. I'm going to try to do this process a bit faster so that you guys don't have to sit and watch this entire process. But yeah, sorry about the audio. Didn't realize I had multiple microphones at the same time. Just want you guys to really hear me properly. Oh, make sure that I repeat myself. Alright. By the way, guys, if you have questions about this at all, put them in the chat. I will check periodically what's going on in there. So do let me know if you have questions or suggestions or anything that you want to know about this technique. Happy to take a quick pause and explain things in more depth if you guys want. This is the whole point of these sort of sessions, to be able to interact with you guys and answer questions or talk about the things that you want to talk about for, or it could be not related to ZBrush, really, doesn't matter. Just ask away. Okay, I think we're getting close to something that I really like, and there's some bits and pieces that are creating a very interesting look. Obviously the topology of this is really messy, and the more that I push these things in, the more that I'm going to break them or break the topology. But again, that's not a problem, because we can turn this whole thing into a Dynamesh and retopologize it using the ZRemesher or just the decimation master. Went blank there for a second. But yeah, so that's pretty much all there is to this technique. I said that I wasn't going to go for this, but I think I'm liking it, so I'm just going to polish it a bit more. And you see that with the variation that we added with the nanomesh, that single piece that we created, that's all we need to create lots of variations and lots of details for this piece. Of course, if you want to even be more, more careful about how you place these things, or want to create more variation and be completely sure that what you do is more organic and or more realistic, depending on what you're going for, make sure that you create more than one nanomesh tool, so that you have different options when it comes to applying these bark pieces. So definitely this technique is something that I use quite a bit to detail these type of things. That I don't want to spend too much time sculpting these areas when I can easily get a good start with the nanomesh. Now we can do the same thing here for the bar, for this part of the branches. We can do manual insertion of the nanomesh, or we can also use the multi-mesh insert, or the insert brush that we created for the before the nanomesh. But I think most of them are going to be covered by the trees, but the branches anyway. Alright, this area is looking a little bit too messy for my liking. So something that we can do if pushing these pieces doesn't really work is using the Sculptris Pro to reduce the size and clean up this mess a little bit. So I'm going to try to do my best to do it with the move brush before moving into that. Alright. This one is looking weird as well. Make sure you look at your model from every angle. That's really important. And from the distance as well. I think I like this. I think it's looking good. And those pieces of bark definitely, the overlapping of those really help. And you can obviously move them individually to fine tune the flow of these pieces as well. Let's go ahead and bring back everything, holding shift and clicking on this. Make sure I don't have some extra bits that I don't want to see. There we go. So that's looking good. There's some pieces that obviously need some more work, but like I said, we can use the Sculptris Pro to fix these areas. One thing that I like though is that the fact that the pieces are quite big in proportion and in relation to the tree really helps with the scale of these little bonsai. So having the bark pieces being so big, it really helps to sell that idea that this is a kind of like a dwarf tree, really tiny one. And that's all achieved or helped by the scale of all these pieces. So I just want to clean this up a little bit because we're also going to do some fiber mesh. Hopefully we have time. How are we with time? We still have an hour. So I'm just going to show you a quick poly paint technique, and then we're going to go into a little bit of fiber mesh and show you how I would approach the creation of moss and maybe some grass if we have time. But definitely I'm going to try to finish this up today or in this stream so that we don't carry the same piece for the next week. We're going to start something new and work on different techniques. Let's just do a quick save just in case. Alright, I just want to make sure that the pieces that you can see sort of like from the side, like these ones here, don't look too straight or unnatural, so we can just push the middle part of each piece to make it look more, so it conforms more with the curvature of this tree here. Alright, so I'm going to do a quick save. I'm going to check the chat, have a sip of water, and then we continue with the next one. Oh, glad to hear that the sound is much better. Okay, why not just make a material in Substance Designer for all that? Because yeah, you can totally do that, but for a few reasons. The Substance Designer is great, but I don't use it much, because although it's great for this type of automated stuff and procedural creation of textures, I don't know, I think I'm too old school, and I just like, not that I prefer it, I totally love how Substance Designer creates these incredible materials. I'm just like the fact that I can do it manually. So that's why I use Substance Painter most of the time. I do use some materials and some substances from Substance Designer, but I like to mix them up myself. So you can totally do that. However, I think I want to create this as a sculptural piece and everything within ZBrush. So I don't want to make it like a low poly. I just want to make a little bonsai that maybe I can print out. So, you know, it will be a fake bonsai that wouldn't die like the one that I used to have, and it did die. So it might be a very complicated piece to print out because the thickness and the overlapping areas and some bits and pieces might not be connected. So I have to be very thorough about setting this up. But I think that's the main reason, really. Now there's some pieces here. Let me just finish if there's any of the question. Could you show us the city you created with nanomesh, if you don't mind? No, sorry, cannot do that. I don't have it here, and it was just for a demo, so I don't have ownership of that one. But I can show you the technique later if we have time. I was wondering if you have a good workflow for the creature hair using fiber mesh. Yeah, you can. I mean, the workflow for fiber mesh is really the same for whatever you do. It's just a matter of knowing what the end result or how you want it to end up looking at the end, and then that's how you choose the tools and how to tweak it. So in this case, I'm going to show you some techniques of fiber mesh, but they might not be suitable for the hair of a creature. But I would definitely show you some bits. Another thing here is that you can see some of the low poly mesh of the tree bark. So something we can do is go to this, the original mesh that we used to drag in the pieces, go into solid mode, and we can subdivide this a couple times. See what that gives us. Alright, and then we can turn our little piece here. Let's see where it is. You know what? Because ZBrush crashed on me, I lost it. Alright, let's see if we can sort of recolor anything at all. I'm gonna go to this piece and I'm gonna select a little piece that is not. It's gonna be a hard one, but let's see if I can do it. This is a total hack to try to record a piece instead of doing it again. So I'm gonna go for a piece here at the back that I didn't touch as much, and I'm just gonna try to pull it out like so. Okay, and I'm gonna bring the gizmo, hold the control key to, oops, here to mask this area. It's gonna be hard. Alright, let's try a different one. Let's try the masking lasso. Mask that area like so. Mask that one here. Invert that mask with control and click in the canvas. And I'm gonna split this little bit. So split on mask part or on mask points. So now I have this single thing. I'm gonna bring in the gizmo, center it. And now I can, it's not going to be the same thing, but you know, this is kind of like the best thing we can do since ZBrush crashed. Okay, so we have this piece here, and we can turn it back into our insert mesh. Well, it is a mess, so insert mesh. And then we can go to this bark tree, and the insert brushes won't work if you have subdivision level. So make sure that if you want to insert this brush manually in all these branches, you remove the subdivision levels, or you can also freeze subdivision level. Right, so you can do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do something, maybe something different, which is I'm going to leave this one as it is, like there. I'm going to bring in this MRGC grabber. So I'm going to click that. ZBrush is going to ask me if I want to switch from 3D to 2.5D, and I'm going to say yes, switch. And then I can hold shift from the center here and create this sort of square, maybe smaller like this. Okay, so that basically grabs whatever is on the canvas. So currently we only have this piece, and the rest is background, so it's nothing, it's transparent. And let's go ahead and go back to our tree. Click and drag to bring it back, Currently it's just this little piece in here, and I'm going to clear the canvas, Control N to clear the canvas, drag it again, go into edit mode or pressing the T, and now I'm going to hide this little piece because we don't need it, or we can delete it if we want. I'm going to just shoot it to the top here where I have all the extra bits that I'm not using. Go into this mesh, right? I'm probably going to have to subdivide it a little bit more. We currently only have 1 million polygons, so let's go to 4 million polygons. Alright, so that's good. Now let's go ahead and bring in the standard brush. I don't want to mess with my standard brush, so I'm going to clone it. And I'm going to select the alpha that we created with that MRCG grabber, which is this one. I'm going to change the stroke to be a drag rect so that we can do this type of thing. Seems to me that it's not working, but we might have to just tweak the alpha itself. So I'm going to increase the size, reduce the focal shift, increase the intensity to 100 just to see if it's doing it. And it looks like it's doing it, but it's not doing a great job, so let's modify the alpha real quick. And in the alpha settings we can go to modify, and we can play with these mid value. So I'm going to put it to 100, and that is too much, so probably just a mid value of 50, 51 should be better. Maybe reduce the focal shift again. And it's not doing a really good job about this, so let's increase the contrast or reduce the contrast. Let's see what that gives us. Not working very well with this one. Let's see if we can go back to our mesh, or to the little piece that we used as an example to create the alpha. And probably the reason it's not working is because it doesn't have a point of reference for the rest of what's behind it. It shouldn't be a problem, just surprised that it's not working as I expected. So what I'll do is copy or clone this subtool. Just gonna click on this clone. So now I have this little piece on its own, and I'm going to, well, unify that just to make sure that it's, and frame it, make sure that it's right in the center of the world, like so. And we can rotate this again. Alright, so that's much better. So what we can do to make sure that the alpha is going to work, again, I'm not sure why it didn't, but it's very simple. We can append a plane. Take that plane, make sure that we are out of solo mode, and I'm just going to position that plane, scale that up, so that this plane will help us create that sort of depth or clip the depth that we're going to grab with the alpha. So this one should give us a much better result, hopefully. Let's go back to the MRGC grabber, switch, shift and click to get this square. Let go, and not sure if he grabbed it. Yeah, it is taking it, so let's do one more time. Alright, so the alpha is called depth grab 05, so hopefully that works. Let's go ahead and go back to our tree. Click and drag to bring it back and edit, and also I'm going to clear everything else. Alright, let's hopefully this works. If it doesn't work, it's not too bad. We're just going to continue with the other ones, and I'll fix it later. Okay, let's go into solo mode. We can drag now this. Maybe this is too much. Reduce the intensity. It's not doing a very good job. I'm really annoyed about this. Why it's not working? Cannot figure it out. So I'm using the right alpha. Oh, here it is. Yeah, so this one is better. I'm also going to add a bit more geometry just in case. Although we're getting close to like a lot of polygons. You know what? I'm going to test it out in a sphere. That's probably the best way to do it. And I'm going to divide this a couple times. So here we have the alpha. So the alpha is working. We just need to tweak it. Okay, change the focal shift, increase the size, the intensity, sorry. So it's not very clear the effect of this brush. Must have done something and I cannot figure out what it is. Just gonna reduce the fall off as well and increase the contrast, increase the size. Alright, so it's coming through. It's just maybe too big for what I'm trying to go for. Seems that it's grabbing just a little part or just a small part of the alpha. Not sure what that is. Better move forward. Yeah, seems that it's just grabbing a little piece of this alpha, which is weird. Looks like something happened with the document size. We can try to fix it, or we can just move forward. So I think I'm going to just show you the rest of the techniques, because this is just a minor thing. We can do it very easily with, you know, the clay buildup brush, for example. And go ahead and just do this type of effect, just to add more variation to it. And then let's turn on or get out of solo mode. And this is the brush that I would use to sort of refine these areas. And it would also help us to do a little bit of integration here with these pieces that we added with the nanomesh. But again, this is not the focus of this trim. Like I can tweak that later on for the final render and figure out what's happening with the alpha. But you could basically drag that alpha into here, and it will make it faster process. That's the only reason I was going for that, because it will be faster than just manually sculpting this. But I don't mind just doing that. Alright, so now that we have this ready, I'm going to show you a couple more techniques. Let's go ahead and poly paint this really quickly. Or even before we poly paint, we can go and do the moss, because that's a really interesting technique. And we have plenty of time. It's 10:20, so we still have 40 minutes to poly paint this guy, add the moss, and add some grass, maybe some additional pebbles and rocks. So I'm having problems with the groom brushes. The groom brushes are fantastic. I just think that the default settings for them are not ideal. So you need to tweak them a little bit. So within the brush palette, there is a fiber mesh sub palette, and you can control heaps of the behavior of those brushes. So after you will be doing the retopology of all these, you do the retopology. No, this is gonna be just a concept sculpt. I'm not gonna retopologize anything. That's why everything is quite sketchy. But you could totally go for retopology of this. I'm not gonna do it because we won't have time here in this stream. And like I said, I want to finish this one today and move on to something else, just to show you a variety of techniques. We can retopologize something else in another stream. So can you do an overview of the plants and foliage from the moss collector? I know it's an old piece, but I have always been fascinated by it. Thanks, mate. Yeah, that's I can show you. Actually, the moss that I'm going to create here is similar to what I did in that piece. So maybe that gives you some ideas. All right. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to do a quick save, and I'm going to create the moss, or the areas where I'm going to draw the moss for this bonsai tree. So here is a really cool technique that I've been using lately for another project that I'm working on, and it's really nice. So all we need to do to make it work is append a C-sphere, and here is the C-sphere, and we can move the C-sphere out of the way so it's not annoying us or getting in the way, really. It doesn't matter, the C-sphere could be anywhere you want it. You could just put it whatever. I just want to put it here at the bottom. You know what, actually I'm just going to put it here at the top so that we don't mess with the flatness of our project. So in other words, there's still some problems in here because I have some subtools still that are quite big, and they're sort of adding volume to that. That's why this is not right in the middle. Anyway, forget about that. We can put that C-sphere back down if you want to. Doesn't really matter where you place it. And now that we have a C-sphere, I'm going to go ahead and turn off a few things just so it's faster and easier to see. So I'm going to turn off the leaves, and I'm going to turn off the bark. And I have, for some reason, these two pieces separately, which I don't know why. You cannot even see them. So that's the problem of working in a sketch in a messy way. I have everything within the subtool palette here. Alright, let me just check. Alright, I think we're good to go. So I currently have only enabled the base and the tree itself and this little C-sphere. So I'm going to select that, make sure that it's visible, and then scroll down to the C-sketch, right? And this C-sketch is fantastic because it allows you to create geometry and create volumes just by sculpting. And it's not the same way as sculpting a mesh that you already have. This one actually creates mesh almost like if you were sculpting, like adding pieces of clay, and that's how I've been using it lately. So I'm going to go ahead and click Edit Mesh, and I can increase the brush size. You'll see that the tool now becomes, or the brush becomes, this sketch brush. And I'm just going to start adding these spheres. So this sketch, I can also hold the Shift key. And it's really cool because I'm going to draw very quickly pieces of geometry around the areas that I want to create that moss. So just thinking about where it could be, like the water or the dampness of this scene could be accumulated. So whenever there is kind of like a shade generated by these shapes, that's probably when where the moss is going to be anyway. But also around here, around the top. So you see, I'm just drawing or playing with these strokes, and it is essentially creating geometry as I go. So really handy technique. And again, this is just creating the moss. Obviously I want something to go on top and cover a little bit of the tree. Also the moss, like any other plant, whatever, is going to, oh, here is the little piece that we separated, found it, and that one is here. No, that's here. Alright, let's continue. So what I was saying is, because like any plant, they will probably strive to get some sunlight. So I'm just going to try to place these wherever they might spread, pointing upwards, or in the y-axis, just because that's what I think they will be positioned, or how they will spread really. But again, like I said, they also like wet areas and dampness. So this is very rough, but you get the idea. There's another tool here using the C-sketch that we can use, and I'll just show you that in a bit. Just want to create a bit more volume here, and this is all where the moss is going to be placed. It's not necessarily, this mesh is not the moss, it's just the base mesh, I guess, for where we're going to create it. I'm going to add a little bit more here, and I'm holding Shift to smooth out these paths, or these blobby C-spheres. And I'm just going to sort of cover a little bit of the flat areas of the rocks. Okay, it looks pretty messy. Doesn't look really like nothing properly done. I don't want to add this one here right now, but again, this is just going to be, we're just creating some geometry. It will make sense in just a minute. Alright, so I think that's looking good. I know it's not looking good, but I think I know what I'm going for, so I think for what I think is going to work, it's looking good. So alright, once we have this here, I just want to show you a couple more tools that you can use. So you click on the C-sketch tools or the brushes, you have a bunch of extra ones. So you have this armature, you have the smooth brushes, and you have a couple more like bulge or sketch. So this one bulge is kind of like an inflate brush, and the armature allows you to create pieces or continuity of this sketch that is not following the mesh. So if I click on that, I can just go and do things like that. So again, really easy. And I can use that very quickly to, maybe with a smaller size, to add some, you know, some dangling bits and pieces of moss as well. Maybe smaller than that. Alright, so that's kind of like how the armature works. And as you can see, if you're sketching and making a character, you can very quickly with this armature create, you know, the torso, the legs. So it's like growing from there. And that's also another way that you can increase or you know, add more branches to it. So it's a really powerful technique. And it's something that I don't see a lot of people using, and that's why I wanted to bring it up, because it's been there for years and it is absolutely fantastic. Alright, so now that I have the C sketch, the C sketch, let's see how we can make this into, or convert that into a usable mesh that we can sort of use as a base to add the moss. So right now this is just a C-sphere, or it's part of the C-sphere. The process is called C-sketch, and I have this edit sketch here. So we need to convert that and create a unified skin. So ZBrush is going to take all of those blobby pieces that we created, and it's going to create a Dynamesh base mesh. So here on the unified skin, let's open that up, and you can do a preview. Just click preview, and that will give you this base mesh. And I think that's looking alright. Again, this is just the placement of the moss, is not the moss itself. So I think that's looking good. We can change the resolution as well if this is like too low, but I think it's totally fine. So I'm just gonna go for that. So click make unified skin, and now we have a separate bit or a separate mesh that we can bring in. So this is still the C-sphere. We just need to turn off the preview and unedit the sketch, and we can take the C-sphere and just shoot it to the top again, where I have all my unused pieces. And now we can go to the unified mesh that we created, this little thing here, which is pretty cool on its own, I think, and copy, go to the tree or the tool that we're working on, paste, and now we have it in there. Alright, so I'm just gonna do a quick save, check the chat if you have questions about that process. I just did it a little bit faster to save time, but if you have specific questions about this technique, I'm happy to answer it right now. Thanks, I found your ZBrush Summit Part 2 vid. I think I will answer a lot of my questions, I think. Oh, cool, thank you. Yeah, it's in the ZBrush guide. There is my experience in the amazing ZBrush Summit. I'm looking forward to this year. Hopefully I have the time and the means to get there again. How it's the best way to do leaves for games? What's the best way? It depends, but I will generally say that a plane using the maps would be the best way, using different maps. So you can get a normal map to get all the details, and also depending on the game engine, you can play with the shading as well, and that way you can create a double shading effect and the you know, translucency and all that. But in terms of modeling, I would just model the actual leaf like I did for this bonsai, and then I will do a retopology in a single plane, or maybe a plane with a couple of extra edge loops, so that I can bend that plane, and then I project those details of the original mesh and export the maps. That would be the best and more optimized way to do it. Can you show us Decimation Master without losing the details of geometry? Yeah, that's essentially just reducing, playing around with this. So if you do Decimation Master on this piece, for example, and you don't want to lose as much detail, you just need to play with the decimation percentage. It's just, I mean, it's impossible to use decimation without reducing the details. You want to keep some of those, you need to just find a nice balance between how much you want to reduce and in which areas you're going to reduce that. You can also use polypaint to drive that. Virtual high five from Iceland, brilliant. Thanks, mate. And with a negative edge to create something that looks more like moss. Not sure what you mean. Time to apply a clay polish to this blob. Oh, okay. No. So this, let's continue with that so I can show you the technique. So this blob that you see here, this lava blob, it's not the moss itself. I'm just creating the base mesh so that I can create the moss using fiber mesh. Okay, and I know you can create fiber mesh based on the masking of this tree, but I just want to do it in a little bit more control and have more volume on the moss, because if you pay attention here, let me just bring in the references that I have. Moss, the moss itself, it's really, what's a good option here? Maybe this one here. The moss itself, the thickness of it is not a lot. Like the leaves or the moss itself is quite small. So the curvature and the different volumes of the moss is given by what's underneath, I think. So the earth and any a piece of tree or bark, or like in this case probably just pebbles and rocks. So that's why I did that little blob, so that we have that extra volume. Now I can go ahead and run a clay polish if I want to, just to clean this up a little bit, but I prefer to use the polish slider from the deformation palette. So I'm gonna polish this a little bit just to make it smoother. Okay, I think that's looking good. And then I can go with the Sculptris Pro Enable and a larger brush. Let's test that out, holding Shift. And I just want to reduce this even more significantly. Undo that. So I just want to reduce the size of these sort of dangling areas, just because once I add the moss, it's going to add more volume. So I want this to be very thin. Well, not very thin, but thin enough. Alright, and I also don't want them to look like lava, sort of like drips of something. So what I can do now is use the snake hook brush. So let's bring in the snake hook brush, reduce the size, and I can sort of connect this, or not connect, but just push these areas a little bit like that. Again, it doesn't matter that this is not perfect. This is just to add a little bit of volume to the placement of the moss. Another cool thing that you can do, just remember, I want to show you this technique, using the snake hook brush and this Sculptris Pro, is when you start pulling an area like this, you can hold the Alt key and that it will snap to the surface. So if I want to follow this part here, this root of the tree, I can hold the Alt key and it will just snap to the surface. So that's pretty handy. Alright, I'm going to bring in the clay brush, and I'm going to use this to sort of, with holding Alt, push certain things that I don't want to keep or I want to add. Just sort of clearing up a little bit of the space where the moss is going to be. And you can make it more blobby if you want, of course. And the reason I'm doing this is because I have an idea of where I'm going for, but of course right now this looks very messy, very sketchy, very blobby. So just bear with me. Hopefully it's gonna give us a nice effect. Okay. Alright, cool. This is looking good. I think I'm just gonna push this a bit more. The whole point of this is to make it resemble moss is to make it blobby. So this is looking good. This is what I'm going for. Just gonna reduce this a little bit more. Didn't really like those areas. But we can also, let's do one more thing before we do the moss. We still have time. Select the snakehook brush. We can use the masking tools like that, and we can push things in like so. Like I said, this is just so that we create that sort of connecting effect of these little parts of the moss, but because I don't want it to be looking like, you know, drops of anything. All right. Another thing that you can do is using this mesh or with this subtool selected. Let's go ahead and click in the curve brush, or actually the curve multi-tube brush with a small size, and we can create these type of things really quickly. Maybe a smaller size. These are just little pieces of moss that we can create. Oops. I mean, I'm not gonna fill it with this, but you get the idea. Alright, go to stroke, curve modifiers, curve function, sorry, delete the curves here, select the move brush, and I'm just gonna chuck them in there. So I know, again, very sketchy, but that is the idea of this step. Cool, so now that we have that blobby thing, what we can do is use Dynamesh to put it all together, or we can, I mean, we don't have to, but if you want, you can Dynamesh everything, or you can use the Unum by Mesh as well. So I think we are ready to go. I'm gonna do a quick save, and let's go ahead and create the moss. Go ahead and select a plane. Maybe this one that we already did. I'm just going to create a new one so you guys see what I'm doing. So I'm going to create a plane. For this to work, I'm just thinking the best way would actually be to change the document size. So I'm not going to do that just now. I'm going to go to first, let's convert this plane into a polymesh 3D so that we can tweak it or change it. And let's go ahead and go to the geometry subpalette, turn this smooth divide, the subdivide smooth modifier off, and then subdivide this a few times so that now, if we select the, let's say the damp standard brush, we get we get more resolution to work with. And what I'm going to do is create the shape of the moss, but I'm not going to do any sculpting on this plane. I'm actually going to select this brush that I have custom here. It's like a Sharpie thing, which just add poly paint. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is fill in the entire object with black, and that's going to allow us to play with transparency. So now that I have that set, I'm just going to reduce the size of my brush, and I'm going to create this moss using the green color, like a bright green. Okay, so I'm going to start from the top and do this type of thing. So if you look very closely to what moss is, it's just a very tangly set of, like a grass almost, but very tangly. So all entangled together. So something like that I think is going to work really nice. We just add a few more here at the base. add some thickness here at the base as well, and let's reduce the size of the brush a bit more and just add a bit more of that. So again, this is super sketchy, but we're going for something stylized, and also it's not going to be very visible. We just need to add some variations to this piece. Hopefully this is going to work. I think I'm just going a little bit over the top with the details, but hopefully it's going to work. So now that I have this color ready, I can do another pass with maybe some darker, more desaturated colors. Just be careful not to get too close to the black color, because again, black is going to be used as transparency, or ZBrush is using that as transparent. So I just want to add a little bit of variation with these colors here, maybe a bit of greenish, yellowish as well, and a bit brighter, to add some hue differences here. Bit brighter here, and a bit brighter the green as well. Some final tweaks. And again, this is super sketchy, but you'll see that once we add it to the technique that I'm going to show you, it's going to look much better. And this is going to be very, very small, so we don't have to be that precise. You can totally spend as much time as you want, or you can even find a piece of moss, take a photo, and then turn that into a texture, which is pretty much what are we doing at this point. Okay, so I think this is looking alright. So now with this texture, what I'm going to do is change the size of my canvas so that I can grab that exact sort of frame and turn it into a texture. Or you can actually, you know what, if we reduce, this is probably easier. Let's go ahead and reduce the subdivide, or let's go to the lowest subdivision level, sorry, and go to the plugin master, the Z plugin, and go to the UV master, and let's click unwrap. That's just going to give us a quick unwrap of this plane. Now let's go back to the highest subdivision level, and let's go to the texture map, and let's create a texture from polypaint. So now we have this texture. That's probably a faster way to do it, rather than crop everything and then grab dog from texture. So that's the technique that I was going to use. I was going to make the canvas a square, go to texture, and then grab from here, but it's easier to do it this way. So now that I have this texture in here, I can clone the texture so that it appears here in our texture palette. And now let's go back to our tree with all the blobby stuff. And what we need to do is create fiber mesh in this blob. So we can, I'm gonna leave the rest of the subtools visible. And what I'm going to do is open up the fiber mesh sub palette. All right, so if with anything, if I don't have anything masked and I just click preview, ZBrush is gonna give me fiber mesh for everything. So this is something we can do. The problem with this approach is that if I go into solo mode, you'll see that I'm also getting a bunch of fibers here at the bottom, and we probably don't need this or these many fibers right now. So there's a few things you can do about it. You can manually mask things, or you can create polygroups based on the camera angle. So that's what I'm going to try to do now and see how that works. So let's turn off fiber mesh, and let's go ahead and go to the polygroup palette here, turn on polyframe, and I'm just going to hold Control and W to assign a single polygroup. So now we have a single ID, and if I make sure that perspective is off, if I turn the camera around and I'm looking at it from the bottom, we can click on this group front. Let's do it again, and it gives us this blue polygroup. But if we rotate around, you'll see that we have a different polygroup for all these parts. So I'm not sure if this is necessarily what we want. We can play around with this angle. So let's just create another group, go back to the bottom. Let's see if we can reduce the tolerance a little bit. Group front, maybe a little bit more. Okay. All right, much better. So this is what we want. right? So again, that was just using the group front from a camera angle and using the angle to tweak that. So now that I have these two polygroups, I can very easily, let's get out of solo mode, go back to perspective on, switch this polyframe off. Now we can go to our fiber mesh, and before we turn this on, I can hold Control and Shift and select this area. So basically, if I turn this off, you see I just selected the top bit or the top polygroup, and now we can go ahead and click Control once in the outside, and that will mask everything. We can bring in now the rest of the polygroups, invert that mask. So now I basically, oh no, let's not invert that mask. We actually want the mask in this polygroup. Okay. So now we can get out of solo mode, and we can use the masking tools as well to blur that mask a little bit. Or we can shrink it. And just blurring and shrinking that mask will allow ZBrush to fade the placement of the fiber mesh if we want to, using some of the tools here. Alright, so again, all we did was take that blob, created some polygroups using the group front from the polygroup palette, and mask out, just to make it easier to mask out the area that we want to grow the fiber mesh. So now that we have this area, let's click on preview, and we can start playing around with these settings to create the moss. So we have about 15 minutes, so I'm going to show you how to do that and how to create the grass as well really quickly. So the first thing I like to do is change this base color to white and the tip as well to white. I'm not interested in any color. We can probably change to skin shade 4 so it's easy for you guys to see what I'm doing. And I'm going to decrease the mask, the amount of fibers. And I'm going to increase, also decrease the length as well. And I'm going to increase the coverage quite a bit. So I have now these pieces. I also want to remove any twist just for the time being. And we can increase the size if you already reach the maximum coverage, the 15,000, and you still don't see this as a big sort of piece or a big polygon. You can tweak that from the width profile. So in other words, you can just open that up and increase this. That will make them much bigger. And we can go back now and tweak that from the coverage, like so. And another thing I want to do maybe is increase the length a little bit, and maybe increase the fibers as well, so we get more of those. So this is similar to what I did with the moss collector, a little bit more, you know, with more control over the placement, but essentially this is the process. So now that I have those planes, I can just apply the texture that we did and create the moss. So let's go ahead. We're gonna tweak the settings a little bit more, but just so you know what I'm doing. Now that I have these planes, you can also play with the segments. So segments are essentially how many subdivision each one of these planes have. So this plane right here currently is subdivided into 3 segments, which means it has two edge loops like that. And that is what, if you look at it from the side view, it allows us to sort of bend this way, because it has this section 1, 2, and 3. So if we decrease these segments, we're going to end up with, if you leave it to 1, we're going to end up with a single plane, which you can totally do that, or you can increase that, and then we'll have a much more, like a smoother, you know, shape, again looking at it from the side view. I'm just going to leave it with 3. I think that works fine. Do a quick save, just in case. And let's turn that on back again. And let's go ahead and select from this thumbnail, let's select the texture that we did before. So this one right here. And this is going to pop up. Just go for yes. That means that it's going to shrink that original size, which is 2048 or 248 by 2048. And it's going to shrink it down to probably something more optimized. So you can see that the base of the texture is now, if we zoom in, at the base of this fiber mesh. So this is what we want to do. And this texture is populated along the way of all the polygons. So now that we have this, we can tweak the transparency and the anti-alias. So I'm going to increase the transparency, and that will hopefully, ZBrush is going to allow us to play with the black color that we created to be transparent. So straight away you see this looks really cool, very detailed, really interesting, and we didn't spend too much time adding those. So we can come close and see what is really happening, right? Another thing is you'll see the borders are a little bit, you know, not as sharp, so that's what the anti-alias allows you to do. So play around with that. And I think in this case, because we did a very sharp contrast between the black that we use as the background and the green for the mesh, we can get away of, you know, playing, leave this anti-alias off. Cool. So now that we have this here, we can go back to the fiber mesh settings and rotate them, play around with those, and see what gives us a better result. So we can, for example, increase the coverage. That's just going to give us lots of moss, like so. Maybe we can add even one more segment, just to 4, so we get more bend. And the other thing we can also do is go back to the twist. So if you remember, it was originally, I think by default, it's at 18. So I changed it to 0, but this allows the mesh or the fibers to rotate over itself. So in other words, this is the twist. So if you look at it from the top, it will look something like that, right? So it's sort of rotating over itself, and that's the twist. So we can add a little bit of twist. Let's get closer so we can see what's happening. Because right now everything looks very flat and it's over each other. And this is another technique that you could have used for the leaves. So I'm gonna go ahead and twist that tiny bit. And this slider right here adds variation to that twist. So we can also add variations and make it more random. All right, so I think that's looking pretty good. And finally, we can also play with the gravity. So if I remove gravity, this is going to sort of like shoot out those planes from the normal of the polygon. If I add full gravity, it's going to push them down. But then let's just not go full gravity, because I want some volume. And the other thing is we can play with this direction variation, and that also is going to randomize the placement of those planes quite a bit. So not too much. All right. So I think I'm happy with this. So I'm gonna leave it there. And how am I with time? I'm gonna come back to this and bring in the rest of the bonsai so you guys see what the progress that we've done. And now looking at it with everything on, it seems that it's quite it's a lot. So I can just go to the fiber mesh and I can reduce the length a little bit. Okay, so that's much better. And now that I'm happy with this, I can just click accept. It was gonna ask me if I want to activate the fast preview. In this case, I definitely want that. I click yes, and you'll see that it's only showing me the kind of like the fibers or the guides for those fibers. If you want to be able to see that after you created the fiber mesh, so now I have a fiber mesh subtool right here. If you want to see the changes, you can go to preview settings here and turn this off, and then we're back on. Let's just leave it on so you guys can see it. Alright, so let me just check the time, have a sip of water. I can answer any questions you guys have about this process. And if we have time, and depending on let me check the schedule. So who's next? Okay, so Sebastian is next at 5:30. So I'll probably have to wrap it up. Yeah, I'll have to wrap it up. But let me just answer any question. Hopefully this gives you an idea of how I approach this level of detail really quickly. Is that only diffuse map? Yeah, it is just a texture, nothing else. You could potentially go back to the plane where I draw everything. Right? So you can come to this plane, and as you draw, you can also enable the CAD right here, and that way you'll add depth to this plane. So you can grab the height map or the normal map as well, and you can also export those maps and again bring it into a game engine or whatever it is that you want to use it for, and create that. But it is so tiny, and I wanted to use a lot of fiber mesh that it doesn't really make sense to add the normal maps, plus you won't be able to see them in ZBrush anyway. Will there a vote on Switch, a video in Switch? Jumped at the end, but really interested in the whole process. Yeah, this stream is going to be in the Twitch channel and the Pixologic ZBrush Live channel. So you can go to ZBrush Live or pixologic.com/ZBrush Live, and there you can find the presenters. If you find my name, it should be under my sessions or my my previous sessions. I think it's going to be ready by next week. I'm not sure. All right, how do you manage direction and amount of these graphs? Let me show you that. Okay, cool. So let's create some grass, just because this moss changes the proportions and the size of things right now. So we have about 10 more minutes, so I'm going to do this really quickly without trying to explain too much. But the idea with the grass, as I was saying, is to give that sense that this bonsai is really small. So the bark and the leaves are helping with that, but the moss is looking like too small for the scale. So we can either increase that and recreate the fiber mesh, or we can create some pieces of grass really quickly. So I'm going to repeat the same process for the moss. So I'm going to go back to my plane. I'm going to duplicate my plane, and I'm going to fill it with black. Fill object. Whoops. Am I filling it with anything? Oh, I have the texture enabled, I think. Yeah, texture off. All right, and now I'm going to, for the grass, I'm just going to use more saturated green. And I'm going to create a couple of pieces of grass, but I'm going to make them really fat. Okay, with black, I'm just going to refine this. And just add a little bit of brown to that base. That's too much, but you get the idea. This one could be a little bit more thoroughly done, especially because it's going to be larger, but in an effort to keep this short and because of the time constraints, I'm just going to do this like that. Maybe add another one. And with black, I'm just using black to clean these, make them sharper. And one more here. With black again, just sharpen this one like so. And we can create a fake sort of ambient occlusion here, where these two sort of overlap. Again, this is super rough, and you can totally use an image like a texture from the internet. That's going to probably give you a more realistic effect. Alright, so now I think I'm done with this texture. I'm actually going to reduce the size of this one here a little bit, and this one as well. Alright, super rough stuff. Now that we have this, let's go ahead and create a texture from Polypaint. So now we have this one right here. Go back to our mesh with the tree, and this time I'm going to isolate the subtool that has all these rocks. This one here, going to solo mode, and right now let's see, we have a bunch of polygroups. Let's just hold Control W to assign a single polygroup. Do the same process again, go to the polygroup subpalette, and we're going to group front. That's not good enough. Let's just tweak the angle a little bit. Group front. I think this one is a bit better. Yeah, so I'm gonna go for that. I'm gonna hold Control and Shift at the same time to isolate this polygroup, and I'm just gonna clean up some of these bits and pieces that we don't need at the bottom by hiding them. I'm gonna hold Control to mask this area, bring back everything, turn off polyframe. So now I have only these mask areas, and I can go to the masking sub palette and I can shrink that. Shrink mask. Oops, not that much. So something about there. Bring everything back, and there's some areas that we don't need to have masking, and we can go ahead and, not sure why I'm seeing everything. Okay, there's some areas that I don't need to have the masking, so probably here in the middle, I'm gonna go into solo mode, invert the mask, and I'm gonna mask out with the mask pen. Just gonna mask out these areas. How will we time? All right, we're gonna finish up this really quickly. This is the last bit I'm showing you today. We don't have enough time. Invert that selection. So now we have these masked areas that we can grow fiber mesh from. So we can go to the fiber mesh palette, click preview, and now we have these assets. Like I did before, go back to white so that we can see what we're doing a little bit better, and then play with the settings. Maybe reduce the max fibers. This time I'm gonna increase the length and the coverage. There's too many fibers. It's too many. It's too wide. I'm gonna change the twist, and the gravity I'm gonna set it to almost 0, so you can get these nice looking things. Another thing is that these parts are sort of shooting down, and that is because we probably have the double enable. So in other words, when we have double enable, ZBrush will create fibers in both sides of the polygon, so we can turn this off, turn this on, and then we don't have this at the bottom. Alright, so now that we have this here, I want even larger polygons and more fibers. No, not let me just reduce that. That's not what I wanted. Longer fibers. Now let's go ahead and click on the texture, and whoops, I forgot really quickly to clone the texture that we created. So from the texture palette, clone texture, go back to our bonsai, fiber mesh, click on this thumbnail, select the grass, yes, convert that, and then we can play with the transparency again, anti-alias this time. No, I think it doesn't need it. And now that we have this here, we can play with maybe more segments to give more dynamism, I guess, to this piece of grass. And we're gonna maybe decrease or increase the count of fibers, something like that. Bring back everything together so we can judge how much grass we want to add. So probably the length, again, want to make the grass quite big so that you can tell the scale of this guy. Alright, and once you are ready, we can click on accept, and it will create those fibers, which are just planes, and I think we are ready to go. Let's do a quick render. I'm going to do a quick save because I haven't saved any of these, and let's do a quick render, and I'll answer some questions that you have, and we wrap it up here, guys. By the way, right now the colors are very similar, but because this is just a texture, one thing that I forgot to mention is that you see the thickness of the grass is getting you know, almost too blobby. So the reason that is happening, we select the grass. Do I have selected that? Yep. We go to the fiber mesh, and we have these preview settings, or sorry, BPR settings. And those BPR settings is what allows us to control how ZBrush interprets the mesh that we created. So right now we only want to have 2 sides, which is this one right here. So currently it's displaying it as a cube, kind of. So I'm just going to change that to 4, and let's do another render. And it's going to do the same thing for the moss, so make sure that you do that as well. Alright, you guys have to go with your jargon and whatnot. Now, for people like me who are too uncool to know what VOD is, what is it? Yeah, I don't know what VOD is. I thought that was a mistake, and it was vid. I believe it's video on demand. That makes sense. Entire stream in video format. Cool. Makes sense. All right. So there you go. There you go, guys. This is the end of the stream. I'm gonna wrap it up here and maybe spend some time today polishing this so that I can post it online and you can see the final result with a little bit more work in terms of polishing those shapes and whatnot. But yeah, if you don't have any other question today, I think I'm gonna wrap it up here and leave some space before Sebastian start working on his awesome stuff. So no questions at all. I see you guys next week, and we're gonna start with a brand new stuff. All right. So this is the end of the bonsai. Next time we're gonna work on something else and just making it happen in ZBrush. All right. So that's it for me, and I'll see you guys next week. Cheers.